Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our Economic Forum, Obstacles and Opportunities After the Rally. I appreciate all your attendance, and hopefully it'll be very beneficial. We have four great speakers, one of whom is on his way, John McCabe. So we've changed the order a little bit. We have J. Boyd Page on my right, who's an attorney from Atlanta. We have Jim Simmons on the far right, who is Chief Investment Officer of ICM Asset Management, and Tom Woods Jr., who is an economist and best-selling author of the book Meltdown. The next speaker, and we are very lucky to have him, is Tom Woods. Tom is a senior fellow at the Ludwig von Mises Institute. He's a bachelor degree in history from Harvard and a master's and a PhD from Columbia University. He has written 9 books, and 2 New York Times bestsellers, one of which is Meltdown, which I will give a commercial. He has some here, and if anybody would like to buy one, we have copies at a discount, or you can let me know and I will get them for you. And I've read it, by the way, it's very good. The economy tanked. Well, there's a lot of books here. With that, I'm going to introduce Tom and let him have the microphone.
Okay, let's see. Am I to navigate these thusly? All right. Well, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks to Rich for inviting me. Thanks to the sponsors. Thanks to all of you folks. The book that Rich mentioned is this one. It's called Meltdown, and I'm not going to guilt you into buying one. You buy only what interests you. I'm not going to mention the 3 small children we have with a 4th on the way. It's really unethical for me to bring that up. So I'm going to be giving you a somewhat different perspective because I'm going to be speaking about much broader things because I'm not qualified to tell you where to put your money. And yet I get that question all the time when I do public speaking. What should I do with my money? I wish I knew, for heaven's sake. I wish I knew what you should do with your money. Talk to these guys if that's your question. Let me first start off with a few general observations, and then I'll reveal to you what the subject matter of my presentation is. I think, our previous speaker, I think, warned us about some important obstacles to recovery that await us, and if anything, I think he's too optimistic about the situation. Because we have, for example, major changes in the economy that it's not clear how they will play out. So, for example, the too big to fails are now bigger. What happens in the future? Well, interesting question. We have the moral hazard problem. What's to stop this from happening again, given that everybody now knows that the too big to fail doctrine is the reigning doctrine, and the president gave a speech about financial reform recently in which he said we have to move away from too big to fail, but no, I mean, who can believe what he's saying? And the message that's been sent is that really that you stand to gain nothing by avoiding risk and by being sensible. Because people who run headlong into risky situations, they're going to get bailed out. So if you were thinking, well, when this whole thing collapses, we'll rush in and gain market share, well, you're just a sucker. That's the message that's being sent. So is that the type of entrepreneur we want to be encouraging? I think it is possible we could have substantial price inflation even with unemployment, even with unemployed resources. The 1970s are an example of that. We had tremendous idle resources, including human resources, and that was compatible with inflation. John Maynard Keynes had, in effect, told us that it was impossible for there to be both high unemployment and high inflation. That couldn't occur. Because the argument was that you have the monetary and fiscal policies there, and if you've got high inflation, you do one thing. You got high unemployment, you do another. But if you have them both, well, the Keynesian system has nothing to recommend. But don't worry, both won't happen. Both can't happen simultaneously. Well, they did. They did happen in the 1970s. So what do we do then? Well, this can't happen. Well, who are you going to believe? Keynes or your own eyes? So I do think that is a possibility. We have no acknowledgement whatsoever of the culpability of the Federal Reserve System in all this. Instead, we continue to have this superstitious reverence for the Fed chairman, and we look at him and say, look at all the wonderful innovations he's brought about, as if the Fed were just some innocent bystander in all this, that all of a sudden a crisis occurred out of nowhere, and then they're going to oversee the recovery. I think that's getting us too far ahead. We have to go back. Well, where'd the crisis come from? I mean, did the Fed have anything to do with it? And given that in the president's speech on financial reform, not one critical word about the Federal Reserve was mentioned, that should be almost enough for you to suspect there must have been something the Fed did. Yeah, housing is picking up, but it's picking up basically at the lower end. And it's picking up there because there are a lot of foreclosures, a lot of government credit going on. So this is not necessarily a sign of real robust health. It's by and large phony. The job creation, where's the job creation taking place? In health, in education, and in government. But in terms of producing things, way, way down. So I'm not the first to say that instead of green shoots, we've got brown manure as far as the eye can see, or as the nose can. All right, this is getting a little bit disgusting. Yeah, you get the drift here. Well, what I want to talk to you today about is a kind of an alternative approach to looking at the economy. And that's the approach of the so-called Austrian School of Economics. Now, this has nothing to do with Austria per se, except that numerous practitioners of this school of thought happen to hail from Austria, like Karl Menger, Eugen von Bombawerk. I'll be quizzing you later on some of these names. Ludwig von Mises and F.A. Hayek were from Austria. The Austrian School of Economics, it's a school of thought, it's not a building. The Austrian School of Economics is actually the oldest continuously existing school of economic thought in the world. Right now, it's probably one of the smallest, but at the same time, it's also the fastest growing, because there's been a lot of interest in it recently, because the Austrians do seem to have a kind of rational account of what happened to us, why these downturns tend to occur, and they have great predictive value. There were people in the Austrian school calling the housing bubble before anybody else did, for example. In the 1990s, we were told that we had entered a new era of prosperity in which business cycles were a thing of the past. You immediately know a recession is coming when they say that. The 1920s, likewise, we were told that this was the time we were really told there's a new era of prosperity. We have scientific management of the money supply, thanks to our wise overlords at the Federal Reserve System, which have managed to give us price stability. And given that we have price stability, there couldn't possibly be any problems in the economy because we've got price stability. So the economy couldn't be inflationary, there couldn't be any bubbles. But what in fact was going on was prices should have been falling given the productivity gains of the 20s. So in fact, it was an inflationary economy, but it was masked by the productivity gains. So everyone was predicting that, again, business cycles were a thing of the past. And Irving Fisher, who is considered to be arguably the founder or the grandfather of modern mainstream economics, was saying as late as September 1929 that stocks have reached a permanently high plateau. Ouch. It was Ludwig von Mises and F.A. Hayek who said in 1928 and 1929, the bust is coming. And of course they were laughed at. There is no such thing as bust. Don't you know we've got scientific management of the money supply now? What's the matter with you people? You're obviously old-fashioned, laissez-faire dogmatists. Well, it turns out they were right, and Irving Fisher lost his family fortune in the stock market.